You don't fit in this box over here because of this. You don't fit over here because of this. And it's like, well, I am a Venn diagram of so many different things. How can I just be me?
And that's why I like the X.
That's why I like Latin, because I feel like it unites everything.
First off, thank you everyone for being here, taking the time to have this conversation. Again, we talked a little bit about it before. I don't want it to be like us or them debate. We get enough of that in news every day in the world that we live in and how we consume it. So this is really like everyone in the community that's a part of the community having a conversation about the community. Latino or Latinx, it's been a conversation in our comments on Pero Like. It's been a conversation all over, and it's something that I would love to hear your personal stories and how you identify, what your perspective is on the current state of our community and how you see the identity as a whole in the future. So whoever wants to start of how they identify and why they feel that way, I mean, by all means, go for it.
I'll go. My name is Roz. I identify as Latinx. I mean, obviously, I am a gender fluid person, is how I identify. I like to embrace both sides of me. So for me, as a proud person of Latin descent, when I first heard the X, I was like, that sounds good to me. I mean, sometimes I'm a O, sometimes I'm a A. Like, let's do the X. Why not? Combine them in one.
I also like Latinx, and I'm pretty cis hetero. My family didn't grow up speaking Spanish. My father never spoke to any of us in Spanish, so I had to learn it in school, and I was real bad at it. But I remember learning when, okay, so there's a group of women, it's ellas. But if one man comes in, all of a sudden it's ellos, and my little, 12-year-old feminist heart was broken. And I did not like that at all. And I was like, that is not cool. And then later in school, I learned about the indigenous languages of Central and South America. One of the larger ones, Nahua, isn't gendered at all.
When I started performing, I didn't even want to associate myself with my identity because it was like, I didn't want to get put in a box. As I started reading more and as I started really, like you said, decolonizing, my understanding and my appreciation kind of grew from there. And that's why I adopted the X for a little while, because it was kind of like an acknowledgement of some of the things that we've been through. We have to acknowledge, I think, up front that we're a colonized people. The X for me is like a placeholder of that, of what was lost. And where I'm at right now is I don't use either of them. I use indigenous. I don't want to pick from things I've been given. I want to make my own choice.
I'm more Latino. I'm not against Latinx at all or anything like that, but I just think in this world, there's so many labels that are put on everything. It's inevitable, and sometimes these labels can help, sometimes they can't help. I grew up I'm a Latina. I know what my identity is, and I think that Latinx was something that was created just for people that don't feel like they have a support system or are lost or, need an identity or anything. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I just think it's confusing. It separates you instead of uniting you as a Latin community. There goes another label that you put. You want to stand out, but you don't want to be judged for standing out. It just causes more controversy, I think, with adding the X.
One group that we should be looking at is the LGBTQ+. I mean, before it used to be LGB, LGBT, LGBTQ. I think it's now LGBTQIA+. So I think very much in that narrative, we should also embrace the X as another tool to identify, especially the group that is very much always becomes invisible, the trans and non-binary individuals. So I mean, when I see the X, I think it's a good way to make it visible. It should exist.
I'm for neither. In an age where we're putting so much pressure on having to have a label I am this. That's a lot of pressure to put on a person, especially young kids who I really hope watch this and talk about it. I feel like Latin is just more inclusive, and you don't have to sit there and think so hard about, do I identify as male or female? Am I non-binary? Because not everyone's ready to face that. That's a hard thing to face.
Is Latinx a gender neutral? Does it have to do with sexuality? Does it have to do with identity? What exactly is it?
The fact that the language has masculine and feminine. So, a lot of languages don't have that, or cultures associated with the language. So that's where I think it comes from, the X.
I guess the way I thought about it is always, we're creating these labels and it's just another division. But I don't want anyone to feel invisible ever. It breaks my heart that people feel like they can't say what they are, know? I feel like we need to have a conversation just as humans to bring everyone back together and just acknowledge people for who they are. And I feel like labels divide us.
I love labels. I don't agree that all the time they don't divide people. They highlight what's unique. I like being able to see where somebody's come from, see how they feel about their lineage and their history, and being able to identify as Latinx shows, yeah, I'm proud of this history, but I also see that it is problematic. And so I'm going to change it so that it's not erased. When I heard the phrase Latinx, I was like, sweet, yeah, that's exactly what I am.
You know, because of these labels, it causes these emotions like, how dare you identify me like that, or you're being racist. And it's like, well, no, I'm not. That's how I identify myself.
Probably one of the biggest proponents, at least in academia, is the Real Academia de Español. They are against the X. They are saying that it's not a term, which, mind you, in December, the word selfie got added into the Spanish dictionary. But they're
Why
saying,
is Spain fighting it in the first place? Because they're Hispanic. That's a different conversation anyways. They're not Latin.
A majority of the backlash is from people who don't want anything to change. And it's like language naturally evolves over time. Like if it didn't, we would all be speaking Elizabethan English. Everything that we were taught came within the last 100 years, and it all came from straight white men who told us this is how things are. And we're from a generation that has research, more research available to us to figure out like, hey, this thing that I learned is actually bullshit. And so like, it's gonna make people uncomfortable, but change is uncomfortable. I don't think that it is possible at this present moment to have unity over one single word.
Overall, we can agree that there should be this unification of us as a people to, if there is any issues or problems that are happening to us, how do we better band together as a people to then face that head on universally, rather than being divided, as we always traditionally have been.
I guess use whatever word you think is correct. I know there has been a big push, especially in the media, to use the X because it's looked on as a little bit more inclusive. People identify in different ways, so it's going to be changing. Back in the 90s, the LA Times got backlash because they started using the word Latino instead of Hispanic. Look at us now.
I don't think it's going to come down to a word. I think it's an attitude. We talk about classism and colorism and all that goes into the Latin community, and I think that as Americans with Hispanic and Latin descent, we have to stop judging people for how Spanish they are or they aren't. And I think it's our generation that has to set that example. It doesn't matter if you can speak Spanish. If that's where your ancestors are from, that's what you are. It doesn't matter if you do speak Spanish and you've never been there. It's still valid.
I think at some point when we need to be united, we will unite. So regardless of Latinx or Latino or Latina, at the end of the day, I can put money on it that they're all the same.
This is a good opportunity for us as a diaspora to unite and do something about what's going on the border.
We might have individual squabbles, our countries, respective countries, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be unpacked. But right now in its present time, the greatest threat to any of us and all of us is white supremacy.
This is a good opportunity for us to be the example of everything that's going on around us. That if we could create new terms and words and universally still see each other as people, that will really scare some white supremacy. And I think that's the big challenge, but I think it's a beautiful one, that we are able to be in this stage in our lives and we have this responsibility of a bridge of the older generations to the newer generations. Like, how do we create that in the most fluid way possible?
It's all about us uniting and making sure everyone is seen and everyone feels appreciated and respected. And if you don't know much about people with different gender identities, maybe learn a little bit about it. If they get any of the pronouns wrong or anything like that, that's okay. Like, we're all learning. I'm somebody that is very understanding.
Get to know your friend, get to know your neighbor. If you want an X, you can have an X. If you want an A, you can have an A.
Latinx is a starting point. It's a starting point to other conversations that need to be had. It's a starting point to other areas where we should and can improve. And the reality of it is, we have a responsibility because we are the first generation to even think about it, even adopt it.
When we say Latinx, it's something that some people could attach to, but overall there's this acknowledgement of we're figuring it out. We're all figuring it out, and it's not meant to offend anyone per se, or like if you're not on it all the time, But it's like you said, it's a placeholder of continued conversation to figure out where do we go from here. We are like 1, 2, how many generations we could see where our families were, where they came from, the heartache and pain that got them here, and look where we are now. Like I like to think about like what my grandfather was wearing potato sacks in Puerto Rico, and I'm creating this video with all of you. And that says so much about who we are as people, of what we're capable of, and it makes me very excited of what this term or what the next generation of us talk about. My only last request is, let's all take a photo. Do you mind taking an Instagram photo? Great.
Well, you should get in the middle. You're
Oh, I
like,
should.
yeah, you like
Moderator.
blessed.
3, 2, 1. Yeah, it does work for the.
Yeah, I think we can adopt it now. There you go. Thank you all so much. Y'all are amazing.